You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin.
I knew I shouldn't have come the second we walked into that hotel ballroom. I was wearing my best shirt, the one Denise made me buy for her cousin's wedding last year. She looked amazing in that dark green dress. And me? I felt like a toolbox in a tux. I tried to play it cool, but the second we got to her company's table, I could feel the eyes, the polite smiles, the once-over glances. Denise whispered, "Just be yourself," as she led me over. But the second I shook hands with that smug-ass regional manager, Brent Goddard, I knew how the night was gonna go. He was tall, too tan, and acted like every breath he took cost more than my monthly mortgage. When Denise introduced me, he glanced at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "So," he said, real loud, "you fix toilets for a living, huh?" The whole table went silent. A couple of them gave awkward chuckles. Denise froze. Her fingers twitched next to her wine glass. I smiled tight. "Actually, I run my own plumbing company. Got 2 guys working for me. We do residential and commercial jobs." Brent waved his hand like I just told him I collect bottle caps. "Plumbing," he said, "right? Playing with Legos and pipe glue while the rest of us make real decisions." Someone at the table laughed too hard. Fake and loud. "Quick note. Before we go further, tell us which city or country you're watching from." I clenched my jaw and kept my eyes on him. I'd say keeping water clean and buildings dry is a pretty real decision. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. Sure. Someone's gotta unclog the messes. I suppose if I ever flood my bathroom, I'll know who to call." Denise tried to chuckle, but it came out shaky. She reached for her wine like it was a life raft. My ears burned. I stared down at the tablecloth, just long enough to stop myself from flipping the damn thing over. He kept going. "It's cute though. You get to wear one of those tool belts? I bet you've got all the gadgets. Like Bob the Builder, right?" I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Nah. More like a guy who knows how to keep buildings from collapsing because some corporate genius cut corners. He paused, like he didn't expect pushback. Then he laughed. "Well, cheers to that. Gotta love the trades." I looked at Denise. She wasn't defending me, just sitting there, lips pressed tight. That's when I knew. I wasn't letting this slide. Not this guy. Not this time. I reached for my drink, toasted the table, and said, "Here's to fixing messes, even the ones that wear suits." Denise didn't say much on the drive home that night, but I could tell she was chewing on something. Her shoulders were tight, hands locked together in her lap. When we got in the house, she kicked off her heels, poured herself a glass of wine, and said without looking at me, "That could have gone better." I didn't answer. I just went to the kitchen, opened a beer, and sat down at the table. The next morning, she apologized. Said Brent crossed a line. Said she should have stepped in. But I wasn't mad at her. Not yet. It was a few days later when she came home with the first story. "I'm sorry," she said, walking through the door, dropping her bag on the counter. "Brent brought you up in the team meeting." I raised an eyebrow. "What did he say?" She looked annoyed. "One of the new hires submitted a report with the wrong numbers, and Brent goes, 'Even Denise's handyman husband would have figured that out.' Just like that, in front of everyone." I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Real original. Next he'll be making fart jokes in the break room. "I'm gonna talk to him," she said. "No, you're not," I told her. "You like your job. You've worked hard. Don't give him a reason." She sighed. "I hate this." So did I, but I didn't say it. Quick note, before we get further, share which country or city you're watching from. Next week, it was something else. Brent called her Mrs. Pipe Guy in the hallway. Said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Denise laughed it off, but when she told me, I could see it in her face. She felt small. That's when I started getting pissed. Not the kind of pissed where you break stuff. The kind where your jaw aches from grinding your teeth at night. And it kept going. She said Brent started working me into his team-building jokes. What's the difference between a regional manager and a plumber? One deals with crap on purpose. That one actually got a laugh. She told me she pretended not to hear it. I told her she did the right thing. But inside I was boiling. This wasn't just some jerk mouthing off at a banquet anymore. He was making me part of his routine, turning my wife's workplace into his personal comedy club. I didn't blame her. I could see she was caught. Speak up and risk her career, or swallow it and come home carrying his garbage on her back. That's when I started thinking, if this guy was going to use me as the punchline, maybe it was time I rewrote the damn joke. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to throw fists or go online and cry about it. I wanted something clean, something smart, something that would hit so deep he'd feel it every time he saw a wrench. So I started paying attention. I went through my old client list, looking for any names tied to his company. I called a couple property managers I'd worked with, chatted up an old HVAC guy I knew from a strip mall build-out, asked if anyone had any inside scoop on Brent's branch. Most didn't know anything. But my buddy Travis from Precision HVAC, the guy's got ears everywhere, mentioned something interesting. They're doing a big remodel on that regional office, he told me. Whole floor. Bathrooms, kitchens, executive wing, the works. My boss is trying to get in on it. My brain lit up. Who's the general contractor? He gave me the name. You thinking of bidding? I said I might, but I wasn't thinking of bidding. I was thinking of slipping in through the side door. Quiet. Anonymous. Right under Brent's nose. I didn't have the full plan yet, but I knew one thing. If I could get myself into that building during the remodel, I'd have home field advantage. Brent wanted to play games? Fine. I'd play. But not the game he thought. I didn't sleep much that night. My brain was racing with angles. I kept picturing Brent's smug face. The way he grinned like he owned the world. He thought he was untouchable, sitting up in that corner office while I worked in crawl spaces and busted up basements. But now I had a crack, a way in. I just needed to wedge it open. The next morning, I got on the phone, started calling everyone I trusted, old clients, fellow contractors, even a city inspector I used to fish with on Sundays. I kept it casual at first, asking if they'd heard about the remodel at Norson Regional. That was the name of Brent's firm. Most hadn't. But then my guy Steve, who runs electrical for a few commercial builds in town, said, "Oh yeah, that place on Brookline? They're doing the whole third floor, right?" "Third and fourth," I told him. "Bathrooms, break rooms, plumbing, HVAC, drywall, full gut job." "How'd you know?" I didn't answer, just said thanks and moved on. Quick note before we get too deep, drop a comment with which city or country you're watching from. Later that day, Travis texted me back. He's the HVAC guy who's been in the game longer than anyone I know. GC Spaker and Holt Construction. Heard they're still locking in subs. Want me to send you the contact? I didn't even hesitate. Do it. 15 minutes later, I had the email for the project lead and the scope sheet. Plumbing alone was a full 30-day phase. Rough-ins, fixtures, mainline reroute, water heater install. It wasn't just big. It was mine if I played it right. Now, I couldn't go in under my name. Brent might not know my business, but Denise had mentioned it around the office once or twice. Too risky. So I pulled up our LLC info, scrubbed the email, and sent in the proposal under my partner Joe's name. Joe's great. Solid guy. Been with me 5 years. And more importantly, Brent wouldn't know him from a hole in the ground. We got the job 2 days later. Just like that, I was in. And here's the part that got my blood pumping. The plans had Brent's name on them. Project stakeholder, Brent Goddard. That meant he'd be on site, hands-on, involved in the details. Perfect. I didn't have a blueprint for revenge. Not yet. But I didn't need to. I had access. The second I got that confirmation email, I drove to the shop, told Joe we landed the Norson gig, and he high-fived me without asking a single question. That's the kind of trust we had. The next week, we showed up for the initial walkthrough. I wore my standard job gear, dark work pants, company hoodie, steel toes. No one blinked. Not even Brent, who walked right past us while we were looking over pipe routes with the GC. Didn't even flinch. Just kept yapping into his phone about deadlines and budgets and how we can't have these guys dragging their feet. I looked at Joe. That's the guy. He raised an eyebrow. That guy. I nodded. Yeah. Joe smirked. All right then. It was subtle. Barely a moment. But something clicked in me right there. Brent thought we were just workers. Background noise. Another crew in boots and gloves. He had no clue the guy he'd been mocking for weeks was now running lines through his walls. And he wouldn't know until I decided it was time. The stairwell door slammed behind me, and just like that, I was inside his castle. The place was chaos. Half-demo drywall, wires hanging from the ceiling, tools buzzing non-stop. I loved it. Nothing fancy, just work. Real work. Joe and I got started on the second-floor rough-ins right away. Most of the framing was up, so we began routing the new lines through the east side, which, coincidentally, ran straight behind Brent's future office. His name was already taped on the glass. Brent Goddard, Regional Director. I passed it 5-6 times a day. Hard hat on, sleeves rolled up, dust on my boots. He never looked twice. I was just another blue-collar nobody. Even better, he'd walk through with his Bluetooth in, barking at someone, waving at nothing. Sometimes he'd stop and yell across the floor, "Why the hell is this still open?" Or, "These guys ever heard of a deadline?" We were ahead of schedule by 4 days. Didn't matter. The GC just rolled his eyes behind Brent's back. I kept quiet, smiled, and got back to work. Quick note. While you're listening, tell us which country or city you're watching from. Now, here's where things started getting fun. Nothing big. Just adjustments. Like labeling a cold water line as hot on a blueprint copy. Joe would catch it before install, of course. But the inspector would flag the error in the walkthrough, and suddenly Brent had another delay on his report. I suggested moving one of the main water shutoffs to a more accessible spot. Technically correct, but it required rerouting 2 walls. That little change screwed up the tile contractor's layout. He had to order new pieces. And every time Brent came by, I made sure I was close enough to hear him lose it. "This is why I hate working with these people," he said one afternoon, loud enough for 3 of us to hear. "They don't think. They just dig holes and pray." The drywall guy next to me snorted. "You hear that?" "Loud and clear," I said. We didn't respond. We didn't need to. Guys like Brent thrive on getting a reaction. I wasn't giving him that satisfaction, not yet. But the best part? Listening. I started keeping my lunch breaks near the stairwell by the break room. That's where the office staff would pass through, always mid-conversation, always thinking we were too dumb or too tired to care. One day, I caught 2 of his assistant managers talking near the vending machines. "He told the vendor our numbers were up 12%, one said. "They're not. They're down 7. Classic Brent. Blow smoke, blame someone else. He called me darlin' in front of a client last week. I wanted to punch him. I leaned back against the wall, sipping coffee from my thermos, pretending I wasn't listening. But every comment confirmed what I suspected. I wasn't the only one who wanted this guy taken down a peg. Even the building manager had a name for him. Napoleon in a blazer. He told me when I was checking a pipe joint above the ceiling grid. I laughed. He always like that? He's gotten worse. Thinks this remodel's gonna launch him to VP. I raised my eyebrows. VP? Huh. He nodded. He's banking on this office making him look like some kind of operations genius. New space, modern design, smoother workflow, the works. I tucked that little nugget away. If this remodel was Brent's golden ticket, then every small hiccup we gave him wasn't just annoying. It was pressure. He needed this to go smooth. He needed it to impress. So we kept working, kept it clean. No actual screw-ups. Nothing that would put our contract at risk. Just enough noise to shake the tower a bit. Joe caught on quick. I didn't have to explain it. He started dragging out material delivery questions just long enough to delay drywall finishers. Then suddenly resolve it with a phone call to fix it. And Brent still didn't recognize me. Still walked right past me every day like I didn't exist. I was invisible in his castle. And I was fine with that. Brent was still yelling at someone through his glass wall when I left the site that day. My boots were caked in drywall dust. My gloves stiff with copper grime. But I walked out smiling. That night, Denise came into the kitchen while I was sorting receipts and dropped the bomb. Brent's hosting a client dinner next Friday. Big-name supplier, some new national account. He's making it formal. Department heads and their spouses. I didn't even look up. You want me to go? She hesitated. I don't want you to have to, but yeah. He's pushing it like it's some kind of loyalty test. I nodded. Then I'm in. She blinked. You sure? I'm done ducking these people. She didn't smile, but I could tell she was relieved. Quick note, before we go further, tell us which country or city you're watching from. The steakhouse was downtown, one of those places with $75 ribeyes and wine menus thicker than a car manual. I wore a navy sport coat and dark jeans. Looked sharp, but not like I was trying too hard. Denise wore black, clean and simple. We walked in together, hand in hand. Brent spotted us the moment we hit the private room. He was posted at the head of the long table, whiskey in hand, already 2 drinks in from the look of him. Well, he said loud enough for half the room to turn. Glad you could join us, Denise. And you brought the famous pipe guy. Couple people laughed. I gave a tight smile and shook a few hands. Sat down across from Brent. Let him have his spotlight. He jumped right into his usual act, bragging about his boat, making jokes about real leadership, dropping buzzwords like grenades. He had the room eating out of his hand for the first half hour. Then someone mentioned their lake house. Said they were having plumbing issues out there, bad water pressure in the upstairs shower. Brent grinned and raised his glass. Maybe Denise's man can patch it with duct tape. That one landed hard. A few nervous chuckles. Denise winced. I set down my fork. Could be a pressure balancing valve? I said, calm and direct. If it's older construction, they probably didn't install a pressure regulator on the main. When you've got elevation changes like that, it throws the system off. Simple fix with the right manifold. Silence. Brent blinked. Well, hey, listen to that. You want to draw us a diagram on a napkin, too? I shrugged. I could, but then I'd have to charge you. That cracked one guy up. Even the woman 2 seats down, client rep from the supplier, smiled and nodded. Brent tried to shake it off. Don't mind him. He just likes playing with pipes and glue. I leaned forward slightly. That pipe and glue keeps your bathrooms from backing up and your building from failing code inspections. I didn't raise my voice, didn't flinch. He tried to smile, but it twitched at the edges. Well, thank God for plumbers, huh? I looked him dead in the eye. You're welcome. He dropped his gaze, took a long sip of whiskey. The rest of the dinner went smooth. Conversation moved on. I kept it light, answered a couple more house-related questions from the supplier guy, even got a card from someone asking if we did lake properties. Brent stayed quiet. On the way out, Denise leaned in and whispered, "What the hell was that?" I smirked. Just a small pressure adjustment. The Monday after that dinner, I showed up on site before sunrise, coffee in one hand, tool bag in the other. Still dark out, still quiet. But I felt good. Not smug, just steady. Calm. The tile guys were already unloading. Joe gave me a nod from the truck bed. I grabbed my level and headed inside. That week, things started shifting. Nothing big. Not even mistakes. Just friction. A slow, quiet kind of sabotage. We installed the new faucets in Brent's executive restroom, clean, up to spec, but I made sure they were mounted just a few degrees off-center. Not enough to get flagged, but enough to make a guy like Brent twitch every time he washed his hands. The break room sink? I set the pressure to be just a bit too strong. Not dangerous, but the first time someone hit full blast, it splashed halfway across the counter. Toilets flushed too fast. Water heaters took an extra 15 seconds to warm. Little things. But here's the trick, we fixed every single one the second anyone said a word. Joe would walk in, apologize with a smile, and have it squared away in minutes. No attitude, no excuses. Just fine-tuning, he'd say. Thanks for your patience. Brent wasn't patient. By the end of the second week, he was pacing the halls like a man losing a game he didn't know he was playing. Quick break. Before we dive deeper, tell us which country or city you're watching from. He started snapping at the building manager about sloppy subs and incompetent labor. Said the toilets were mocking him. I wish I was kidding. He filed a formal complaint with the GC. Said the plumbing was visibly misaligned. We had already corrected the faucet angle by then. I handed over the signed-off inspection report. The GC shrugged. He's unraveling. The drywall guy told me in the elevator one afternoon. You hear what he did to the painter? Nope. Threw a clipboard at him. Missed. Hit a lamp. I whistled. Guy really can't handle a build-out? Drywall guy smirked. Man's out here thinking he's running NASA. It wasn't just the contractors, either. Brent's own people started to notice. I caught a junior analyst walking into the new break room, muttering under her breath, God, please don't let the sink explode today. We'd already fixed that one. But the fear was real. Denise came home one night, tossed her heels on the floor and said, He's losing it. He accused me of hiring you on purpose. I looked at her. You tell him? Hell no. I said I don't get involved in vendor decisions. Smart woman. By the third week, Brent was calling daily meetings with the GC, the designer, and the property manager, sometimes all three at once. He kept demanding walkthroughs, pointing at imaginary problems, losing his cool over anything that wasn't perfect. And through all of it, I stayed calm. Just a contractor doing his job. Every weird flush, fixed with a smile. Every sink complaint, handled same day. No errors on paper. No violations. No reason to pull us from the job. But the damage was done. He looked more rattled by the hour. His tie was always loose now. Shirt wrinkled. Hair off. He didn't look like the guy who mocked me at that banquet anymore. He looked tired. Edgy. Like the building was gaslighting him. Which, in a way, it was. The final straw came when he barged into the GC's trailer and demanded they hire an outside inspector to review our work. The GC just stared at him and said, They're the cleanest crew I've got. Brent stormed out. I didn't say a word. Just sipped my coffee and kept reading the install schedule. I circled the final plumbing inspection in the binder and closed it just as the GC walked by. You guys finishing up the paint touch-ups tonight? He asked. Yup, I said. Should be all wrapped by 8. Good. Brent's big pitch is tomorrow morning. Corporates flying in from Texas. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I said, sipping my coffee. That night we stayed late, just Joe and me. Nothing major. Installed a couple of trim plates, rechecked the conference room supply lines, cleaned up some sealant residue off the backsplash. All cosmetic, all clean. But I double-checked the water heater, too. Noticed the pressure release valve was sitting just on the edge. Nothing dangerous, but sensitive. Especially if someone cranked the thermostat or if the system was under sudden demand. I let it be. We locked up at 8 sharp and left the place spotless. Next morning, I showed up on site around 7. Uniform on. Gloves in the back pocket. Joe was already unloading the van when I got the call from the GC. Get inside. Now. That's all he said. I jogged up the side stairwell and opened the hallway door. And it hit me like a freight train. Steam. Not smoke. Steam. And yelling. Loud, furious yelling. I followed it down to the conference room, and there it was. The pipe that fed the main hotline had let loose behind the wall panel. The release valve had tripped, popped the joint, and sprayed hot water across the ceiling tiles. 2 had collapsed. The rest sagged like wet cardboard. Brent's fancy new presentation setup was soaked. Projector, speaker system, all of it. But the best part? The giant table where he'd laid out custom binders for the clients. Each one soaked, curling at the edges. His laptop, dead. His suit, he stood in the middle of the chaos, drenched from neck to knees. Hair dripping, tie stuck to his chest. A few of the hardware chain guys had just arrived and were standing there awkward as hell, trying not to laugh. One was using his phone to film the mess. Brent was screaming at the GC, spit flying. This is sabotage. Who the hell runs plumbing like this? This entire system's a liability. The GC turned to me. Can you fix it? I nodded and walked forward slowly, toolbox in hand. That's when Brent saw me. Stopped cold. His jaw actually dropped. I pulled my gloves on, crouched near the wall, and said loud enough for everyone to hear. Just a small issue with the manual labor, sir. We'll take care of it. His face twisted like I'd slapped him. You, he pointed at me. You're Denise's husband. Licensed plumber, I said, cutting him off. With a clean inspection record. You signed off on every install. You set this up. This was intentional. Pipe let go, I said, tapping the wall gently. Could have been pressure surge, temperature spike, faulty valve. These things happen. That's why you have professionals around. He lost it. You smug little prick. I'll have your license pulled. I'll sue your entire company. I'll bury you. No one moved. The GC just stared at him like he'd farted in church. One of the supplier guys muttered, "Jesus Christ." Brent turned to him. You see what I'm dealing with here? This is the kind of trash they hired. The guy raised both hands. Hey man, we're just here to talk numbers. You do you. I stood up slow, wiped my hands on a rag, and looked Brent dead in the eye. If you'd like, I can go over the inspection notes with your building manager. Everything's signed off. But I'd hurry, your electrical panels might not love the water. Brent lunged forward, finger in my face, but the GC stepped between us. That's enough, he said. Go change your suit, Brent. Brent froze. Nobody was listening to him anymore. He turned, looked at the soaked binders, the puddles forming under the table, the water stains creeping up the new drywall, and then he just walked out, didn't say a word. I twisted the last coupling into place and wiped my hands just as the GC gave me a nod through the glass. Appreciate it, he mouthed. I packed up my tools and walked out the same way I came in, no fuss, no gloating. Just one more day on the job. That night, Denise came home early. She dropped her bag, kicked off her flats, and leaned against the counter. They pulled the plug, she said. I turned from the sink. The account. She nodded. Hardware chains out. Apparently one of the reps told corporate that Brent came off unstable and weirdly aggressive. I almost laughed. Weirdly, she cracked a smile, but it faded fast. It gets better, or worse, depending how you look at it. Lay it on me. Leadership called a closed-door meeting this morning. Half the team's been quietly documenting complaints about him for months. HR's involved now. I raised an eyebrow. About time. Effective immediately, he's off all client-facing work. They reassigned him to internal compliance reviews. I let out a low whistle. That's the basement. Worse, they took his office. It's being converted into a shared space with hot desks. I shook my head. Damn. Word is, he asked to host another client dinner next quarter. They told him it was already handled. I leaned back against the table, arms crossed. Handled by someone who doesn't scream in wet pants, I'm guessing. Denise laughed. Pretty much. Quick break. Before we finish this scene, drop a comment with where you're watching from. She walked over, poured a glass of wine, and sat on the couch. I followed, half listening as she told me about the team meeting that afternoon. People were tense, she said. No one knew what to say. Then Brent's name came up again. Someone asked if we'd have to report to him on budget approvals. I looked at her. And, she smiled. I said, you don't route pressurized flow through a cracked valve. I choked on my beer. You used one of my lines? Word for word. And, the room went quiet for a second. Then people actually clapped. I blinked. Clapped. Clapped. She looked at me over the rim of her wine glass. You were right, she said. You don't always have to shout to make a point. I gave a small nod. I didn't shout, I said. I just made sure the pressure was in the right place. Denise leaned her head on my shoulder while I flipped through channels like we hadn't just burned down a man's career with a wrench and a smile. A few months later, we were setting up at a local charity golf event out at Cedar Pines. My business had started sponsoring small-town events, plumbing and property maintenance logos on banners, free water bottles with our name on them, even a raffle for a tankless install. It wasn't flashy, but it felt solid. Built. Denise handled the booth. I handled the grill. We were about 2 hours into the event when I spotted him across the green. Brent. No blazer. No entourage. Khakis, windbreaker, staff badge clipped to his pocket like it belonged there. He walked up slow, like he wasn't sure I'd swing a spatula at him. I didn't say anything, just flipped a burger and waited. "Hey," he said, voice low, real different from the last time I saw him soaked and screaming. I nodded. He shoved his hands in his pockets. "You got me good." I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just looked at him and said, "We all do what we're good at." He let out a breath. Not quite a laugh. More like relief. "I've been doing some thinking," he said. "A lot of it, actually. And, I owe you an apology. I didn't respect what you do. I thought it was beneath me." I raised an eyebrow. "And now I'm volunteering at a golf event sponsored by the guy I used to mock for fixing toilets." That one almost made me smile. He looked me in the eye. "I was wrong. About you. About the work. About a lot of things." I held out my hand. Takes a real man to admit that. We shook. "Good luck, Brent." "You too." He walked off, quiet. No one noticed. Later that night, while we were packing up, Denise leaned over, slid her hand into mine and said, "Remind me never to mess with the plumber." We laughed. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't need to prove anything to anybody. I'd already done it. What do you think? Was the narrator too petty? Or did Brent deserve everything he got? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you liked this story, hit like and subscribe for more.